Hi there, I'm Cotton and welcome to Cotton Hammer. Today we are gonna do another puddle dive to learn about a minor Space Marine chapter. This time on the Aurora Chapter. A Space Marine chapter that is so addicted to their tanks that they need an entire planet to keep up with their demands. So, without any further faffing about, let's grab our own tank to get through this puddle. So, who are the Aurora Chapter? The Aurora Chapter is one of the many successor chapters of the Ultramarines. Their armor is green with black trim and gold details, which I have to say, without any personal bias whatsoever, is one of the best color schemes. But the reason the Aurora Chapter is famous is for their combat doctrine, Armored Spearhead Assaults. Which might not sound that special at first until you learn that the Aurora Chapter is probably the chapter with the most tanks and vehicles of any loyalist chapter out there. The only ones that can compete are the Iron Hands and their successors. And we're not talking like double the tanks of any other chapter. No. They have more tanks in their motor pool than even founding Legion chapters. You need to combine multiple other chapters to get even near the number of tanks the Aurora chapter has at their command. Especially their numbers of Land Raiders and Predators are remarkable. This is only possible because of their homeworld, the industrial world of Firestorm. Being an industrial world, their factories put out almost as much material and equipment as a Forge world.
Mom, can we have Forge World?
No, we have Forge World at home.
While this of course also feeds into the wider Imperium, the Aurora chapter always makes sure that their ammunition piles are the first to be restocked, and their tanks the first to be repaired and or replaced. They also call dibs on every new or rare piece of equipment manufactured on their homeworld. So, with the basics out of the way, let's talk about their history. The Aurora chapter might be a second founding chapter, but they're actually one of the oldest fighting units of the Imperium. To the point they predate their own legion. The Aurorans, as they were known back then, were a part of the 13th Legion, not yet known as the Ultramarines, cause Robute Guilliman hadn't been found yet. Being raised on Terra, they can trace their origin back to not just the very start of the Great Crusade, but even to the last battles to conquer the entire Sol system, most notably the retaking of Sedna. They made a definitive name for themselves during the defense of Cipramundi against a massive orc horde. Being left alone to defend a city of millions, they took up the defense instead of doing a tactical retreat. After a bloody battle, they stood victorious and had saved the lives of millions of Imperial citizens. Because the sky was filled with Aurorae Borealis during the battle, they took on the name Aurorans, a name that would stick for millennia to come. They also marked their armor with a Borealis ribbon, which is still their chapter symbol today. And finally, cause the Aurora Borealis on Cipramundi was overwhelmingly green and emerald, the veterans of the company painted their armor a shade of green, which, as you could probably guess, is the origin of their current color scheme. Such distinctions were seen as inspirations for other companies and shown off with high pride by the Legion as a whole.
Good Lord, what is happening in there?
Aurora Borealis?
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the
Galaxy.
localized entirely within your
Legion.
Yes.
That's it?
Yes.
After finally reuniting with their Primarch, Rowboat Girlyman, the Aurorans couldn't help but kinda dislike the guy. See, the legions were made up of great companies. These companies developed a certain fighting style and preferences, either based on the early battles or on who they were back on Terra. For the Aurorans, this was armored warfare. They were known as the Armored Spearhead even back then, and thus had a massive motor pool of tanks and transports. But when Bobby G took over the Legion, he wanted to reorganize it for what he thought was more suitable for his own needs. The companies were renamed to chapters. The Aurorans became the 4th chapter. This wasn't what got them all hot and bothered, but the fact that Ragdoll Gorilla Man wanted them all to become identical combined arms chapters did. So the Aurorans countered this with a brilliant political play. They just pretended that they didn't hear him. They kept all their tanks exactly where they were and kept fighting as they had. And whoever complained could just come and try to take their tanks away. Which makes it kinda ironic that the modern Aurorans are certified dick riders of the Codex Astartes. At this point, the Aurorans had 5 times the normal amount of tanks in their Legion chapter, which is kinda difficult to hide.
What you got there?
It's a smoothie.
But to Bobby G's credit, when he, inevitable, noticed that the Aurorans had basically told him to go bugger off and kept their tanks, he didn't fail to notice that they were very effective, and that they cooperated very well with the other Legion chapters that did have combined arms, usually by using their overwhelming numbers of tanks to create a breach that the other Legion chapters could exploit. It's this that led Bobby G to allow companies like the Aurorans to keep their quirks, and he would use them as specialists. During the Horus Heresy, the Aurorans got caught off guard during the betrayal at Calf, when the Wordbearers launched their traitorous attack. They suffered heavy losses during this assault by the Wordbearers, like all Ultramarines present, but managed to rally and survive. Years later, they would join the Imperial Fist with the task of garrisoning Setonia, the homeworld of Horus himself, after it was conquered by the Loyalists. Horus, however, sent a fleet their way to take it back, putting his own world under siege. This was at the same time that the Siege of Terra was underway, so there weren't exactly a lot of spare forces to go around to help them. They were on their own. The siege ended in a victory for the Loyalists after the Dark Angels arrived and destroyed the traitor forces together with the entire planet. Though the full year of fighting had taken their toll on them, and their numbers were so reduced that the remnants of the 4th Ultramarine chapter were barely 1,000, and so could just be reformed to the Aurora Chapter and all was Gucci. But they kept their massive stock of tanks. A lot of the tanks they used in the 42nd millennium, especially the Land Raiders, can trace their history back to the Great Crusade. So, what have they done after the Horus Heresy? We actually got quite a few battles recorded. Almost immediately after their second founding as the Aurora Chapter, they were called to action during the Great Scouring at the Battle of Thessala, where they, and quite a few other Ultramarine chapters, had to get rid of some Emperor's children. And as we all know, a very effective weapon against children are indeed a whole bunch of predators.
Phrasing?
Yeah, turns out predators aren't as dangerous when the children are of the Slaneshi kind.
Come on, give Grandma a kiss.
The results of this battle speak for itself. With almost the entire Ultramarine fleet wiped out and Gilliman getting his throat cut by Slaneshi's trouser snake and put in stasis for the next 10,000 years. After that, we jump to the War of the Beast in the 32nd millennium. During this war, the chapter joined the battle as part of the force led by Maximum Fane for an all-out attack on Ulanor itself. Then, the next reported battle was again versus Orcs, this time on the Imperial world of Gwyalos in the 36th millennium, where an Orc invasion was stopped dead in its tracks by being crushed under the tracks of the Aurora Chapter. Pun aside, the Orcs got completely smashed by an armored spearhead assault right into the heart of the Orc force, which took out key war bosses and broke any of the cohesion, which was little to begin with, that the Orcs had. Now for a fun one, the Eukari Insurrection. Somewhere in the first half of the 41st millennium, the world of Eukari was having an oopsie-whoopsie when the world fell victim to a rebellion led by Chaos forces. After requesting aid, the Space Marine chapter responsible for the planet, the Emperor's Spears, responded and they immediately dispatched a strike force. But when they got to Eukari, they found that the Aurora Chapter was already there fighting the rebels. Captain Twistance of the Emperor's Spears, who led the strike force, started his day by catching a big load of shit from the Aurora Chapter's commander. Basically telling him that he sucks at his job for showing up late, and sucking even more at his job for letting Chaos slip in the first place. This pissed off Captain Twistance so much that he redeployed his entire force back to orbit, moved his fleet over the rebels' capital city, and dumped his entire strike force worth of marines right into the city on top of the enemy leader. After having most of his force slaughtered cause, well, dead, they eventually managed to kill the enemy Chaos Lord after 3 days of fighting. Following this, Captain Twistance then informed the Aurora Chapter that all their fighting meant nothing since they had killed the commander, and further stated that the Aurora Chapter shouldn't be allowed to mark this as a battle fought, let alone a victory, since the Emperor's Spears had done all the real work. This of course led to quite a bit of bickering, which even led to an honor duel between the chapter champions. The duel was a draw, but both chapters claimed their contestant had actually won. This squabbling eventually boiled over and the two fleets started actually unleashing full broadsides onto each other. Cause, you know, if the other fucker is dead, you automatically win the argument. Eventually both chapters managed to gather enough brain cells in one place to call a ceasefire, cause they realized that this was bloody stupid. After almost losing 2 entire chapters to idiocy, the Ultramarines themselves sent a few representatives to judge on how to proceed. Since both chapters were Ultramarine successors, they tried to solve this internally. The Ultramarine representatives found out that, in fact, both chapters were acting like dumbasses. But the Emperor's Spears were deemed to be just a little bit more special. Since dumping your entire force on top of little fortifications in the hopes that a few survive that can take a stab at the enemy leader isn't exactly prime Codex Astartes material.
Codex Astartes names this maneuver Steel Rain.
They decided that both chapters would have to share the glory and battle honors. This caused Captain Twistance to bitch and moan about how the Ultramarines just liked the Aurora Chapter better cause they follow the Codex Astartes more closely. Gee Sherlock, you think? And before leaving in a huff, he swore that he would never set a foot on McCrag again. And if McCrag burned, he wouldn't even try to piss the fire out. You know, completely normal behavior that makes you look really good and collected. Anyway, a few centuries later, the Aurora Chapter got involved in the Guru Heresy. The Guru Heresy happened in the entire Guru system when a chaos-inspired cult, like not even an actual chaos cult, but a cult that just heard a rumor that there are warp gods out there and goes, "Yeah, sure, why not? Let's worship them, see what happens." As lame as that sounds, they somehow managed to get control of the Guru system. The Aurora Chapter came in, smashed the heretics' leadership to pieces, probably by rolling a Land Raider over them as usual, which brought the entire system back in Imperial control in just 10 days. Though the Aurora Chapter Chaptermaster, Nerak Newson, was killed, when the heretic leader actually pulled off warp spaghetti and sacrificed himself to call in a Psy vortex onto himself as a final fuck you. The Redemption Rebellion. Basically, the Alpha Legion were being Alpha Legion again. But today, they weren't loyal.
Uh-oh.
So the Aurora Chapter and the Knights of the Raven were called in to take care of it. At the end of the campaign, both chapters had suffered terrible losses. And they both claimed that the other chapter caused all those losses by sheer incompetence. Knowing how this ends, Manius Calgar immediately stepped in and told both parties to shut the fuck up.
No!
Though this prevented them going at each other's throat, for now, they still have massive beef with each other. Seems the Aurorans have difficulty making friends. For more recent things, at the very end of the 41st millennium we have the Zeist campaign. This campaign was called in by the Ultramarines, requesting as much help from nearby chapters as they could provide. The Tau had gotten rowdy again, and were prepping for their third sphere expansion. Hysterical! The Aurora Chapter was asked to provide support for this campaign to smash the blueberries before they could even start this nonsense. They provide a ton of predators and other armored support to, once again, lead an armored spearhead onto the Tau-held world of Augura. The Tau was smashed aside and had to retreat to their more well-defended and established worlds. However, the campaign had to be called off before the Imperium could get to work displacing the Tau population to the afterlife, because the 13th Black Crusade had just started. While that was happening, other parts of the Aurora Chapter were busy with the reconquest of the 4-star sector. This sector was under direct threat of a massive orc war led by war boss Garagak. It took not only an alliance of multiple chapters, including the Revilers, Death Eagles, and of course our Aurora Chapter, but also the entire Titan Legio Astraman, several Imperial Guard regiments, and even the Scissors of Battle to take the fight to the orcs and get rid of the mushrooms. During the current 42nd millennium, they have participated both in battles during the 13th Black Crusade and have also fought in Ultramar during the Plague Wars. So, now for known members of the Aurora Chapter. This will be kind of a rush cause we have a ton of names but very little info on them. So, from the Auroran days during the Horus Heresy, we got Mantargo, who was a sub-captain and rallied the surviving Aurorans under him during the Battle of Calf, and Ivan Sul, who just gets name dropped during the Siege of Chthoniya. Then we got Ludon, who was the chapter master of the Aurora Chapter during the catastrophic Battle of Thessala. We don't even know if he survived that shitshow. Followed by Herek Nuson, another chapter master that I mentioned earlier that got warp spaghettied by a heretic. Aloysian, Master of the Forge during the War of the Beast. Artzion, a devastator marine of the 5th Company who is shown in the 6th edition Space Marine Codex. Donas Maxim, a codicier, basically a trainee librarian.
I can't read!
Lemodon, a scout who appears in the Combat Cards mobile game. And finally, Ledion and Torath. Both are watch sergeants in the Death Watch. We also have 2 named vehicles. So we got Ardensian, which is a Spartan assault tank, basically the prototype version of the Land Raider. We only know that it was active at Calf. And Harbinger of Death. Really original name aside, it was a Predator Destructor that destructed a ton of heretics during the Goro Heresy. So, like I said, not much to talk about here, but maybe gives you some ideas for names if you want to start an Aurora Chapter army yourself. For relics, just like with the Invaders, we have only a single relic. Remembrance. This is a unique Thunderhammer with an actual interesting story behind it. Its origin is a Land Raider. This Land Raider was destroyed, along with its entire task force, during a battle in Jericho Reach by some filthy Xenos. No idea which flavor of Xenos though. The Death Watch rescued the survivors and recovered as much as they could, including the remnants of the Land Raider. Sadly, the Land Raider was damaged beyond repair, but the Forge Master figured that if he was a tank, he would want revenge. So he allowed the Land Raider to do just that by recycling the main axle of the vehicle into a Thunderhammer. I told you the Aurora Chapter is obsessed with tanks. Now even to the point that they beat you to death with tank parts. Anyway, that's it for today's puddle dive on the Aurora Chapter. I do admit I got a soft spot for chapters that use a ton of tanks and vehicles. I hope you enjoyed the video, maybe you even learned something new. If you did either, please give the video a like. Maybe even consider subscribing if you want to see more of this nonsense. It's just one click for you, but helps out the growing channel a ton. Anyway, thanks for watching, see you next time, cheers!